Welcome to the fourth Data Fam Community Jam. I'm Emily Kund, and I am the founder of the Tableau Fringe Festival. And really, we're all about providing the Tableau community with a platform in which to share their knowledge. As we like to say, we're from the community for the community. Now, we heard through our conversations and listening to people in the Tableau community that they missed getting together and talking Tableau with their friends. And so that's why we've created the Data Fam Community Jam. We've had 3 amazing user group meetings so far, and today I know we are going to have just an amazing presentation from 4 awesome presenters. But before we get into that, we have a special guest with us from Tableau who is going to share an exciting announcement. So I'm going to introduce Courtney. Now, Courtney leads the Tableau Academics Program, which is a community-based initiative that provides free software to students and instructors all across the globe, which is awesome. And over the past 8 years at Tableau, she's been in marketing and education and has spent time as a desktop trainer. So she has a lot of experience enabling data rock stars. And so she is joining us today to introduce the concept of a new program to support education for the next generation of data rock stars, and to see if you would like to get involved. So Courtney, share with us the news.
Awesome, thank you so much. And it is my absolute pleasure to be here with a group of amazing data rock stars today. I know you guys have a Data Fam Jam packed agenda, so I really appreciate you guys taking the time. I am also very excited to talk to you guys a little bit about a program that we've been working on to help bring exciting data concepts to the next generation of data users. So we are now introducing Tableau Data Kids. I'm hoping everybody can see my screen as I reveal some of the great things that we're working on. So we're going to be designing a program, and we're in the works, hoping to launch this very, very soon, delivering teaching tips and data activities, including kid-friendly vizzes, and hopefully tons of fantastic resources from our fabulous Tableau community. So Data Kids should be coming out with a website to begin. We've created a data activity. Really, the point around this activity is to give your kids the ability to learn about data concepts in a fun and engaging way, but also hopefully trying to help our caregivers who are now being faced with working from home, teaching and educating, and really trying to keep sanity around these times, something fun for their kids to do in a way that they can interact with the data that's all around them. The reason that I'm on this call is because we really want your help. So we're hoping that as a community, we can rally together and build some fantastic resources for kids all over the globe to be able to learn these really important and critical data skills that are going to help them in the future and help the future of our world. So we've put together a quick survey, 2 minutes of your time. If you want to get involved, if you want to learn more, please follow this link. Let us know your feedback, and hopefully we'll be hearing from many of you soon. So let's teach the kids to be passionate data rock stars like yourselves, and bring them along that journey with us. So thank you guys very much.
All right, so Courtney, thank you so much for that exciting news. As a parent, I know that I think I have some data kids here that I'm sure are going to be super excited about that too. So now that we've heard that exciting news, I am so super excited to introduce Adi McCree. Adi is going to share with us today about mapping responsibly. So let me just give her a little introduction here, where Adi works for the Information Lab in the UK, and she is an Alteryx and Tableau consultant. Now, Adi is very passionate about mapping because she has this amazing background in teaching geography as well as GIS. And so I am really excited to have AD come on today to share with us mapping responsibly, the 2 key skills to produce effective maps in Tableau. So AD, take it away.
Amazing. Thanks, Emily, for those really very kind words. And look, I just want to start this evening by saying a really big hello to the community out there. And thanks so much for joining the chat this evening. I really do hope that you're all managing okay with how the world is just now. But I'm super excited to be with you all here, from beginners to Zen masters, sharing some critical rules for something called thematic choropleth mapping. Now, you'll probably know this as a filled map in Tableau. It's effectively a map where we use color to display differences in our data through space. In a moment, I'll discuss that a little bit more, but before I get started, I'm going to expand on the intro that Emily gave me to give you some more of my background and why I really have any business at all talking to you as an authority on this. Well, first up, like Emily mentioned, I'm currently in the Information Lab's Data School program, which is designed to plug this skills gap in business intelligence and consulting services. It's a truly unique training program where we're coached by a whole host of Tableau Zen masters, as well as Alteryx aces. Mark Reed, who will follow me this evening, and this event's co-leader, Lorna Brown, are both products of that program. So got some pretty big shoes to fill here, but I'm going to give it a shot. Because at the data school, we'd rate every consultant in the top 5% of global users of Tableau. So I'm bringing you that software expertise. But before the data school, I got a postgraduate degree in geographical information systems, which is effectively spatial data analysis and visualization. And I worked in environmental epidemiology and exposure science in one of the world's leading research institutions. To put that simply, I did spatial analysis explicitly for public health purposes. And so combining that software and subject expertise puts me in quite a unique position to talk about mapping responsibly in Tableau. In this evening's short session, I'm going to be covering 2 critical issues in responsible mapping. The first, do no harm. We'll briefly discuss the moral responsibility that we all have towards releasing visualizations into the public domain. Secondly, we'll cover the key techniques required to make meaningful filled maps, using rates, not raw values, and using the right map layout or projection in Tableau. Now, these final 2 points here, they're not design decisions. They are fundamental treatments of the data that cannot be sacrificed for aesthetic value. To be accurate in our visualizations, in our filled maps, these last 2 things, they're not optional. Now, the drive for getting this session out at this particular time is really the continued and quite misleading media coverage of the coronavirus outbreak. And I'm talking specifically about the way in which the distribution of confirmed cases has been represented in map form. If you are thinking about visualizing COVID-19 data in a filled map, or in fact creating any filled map that includes population, and you want to do that in Tableau, you need to be aware of the inherent issues in that approach. But first up, and most importantly, there is a much larger debate here about the ethics of visualizing this particular data set at all, given the inherent uncertainties we have with variations in testing regimes and in reporting structures country to country. And the virus itself is complex. We don't yet fully understand it. So should we really visualize something we don't understand? We also have to accept the fact that this is a live global crisis. Today, people will die from this, perhaps people we know. And for the vast majority of us, we lack the expertise in epidemiology to work effectively with these data. It's precisely because of my background, my own expertise, that I'm not comfortable visualizing this data set. I know more than enough to know that I don't know nearly enough to do it justice. And now what you decide to do is entirely your call. But we all need to recognize that we have a responsibility to treat the data appropriately, to remember that each case is a person. Like, these are people's lives playing out. There are many, many more data sets out there to use if you're looking to practice spatial analysis or mapping in Tableau. But this is not the right data set to work with unless you absolutely know what you're doing and you have a clear purpose to fulfill other than boosting your Tableau public profile. And like, maybe that's a harsh truth, though I'm not going to make any apologies for speaking it here. Like, these are the things that matter. If you do go ahead and decide to map this, or you want to map another data set that has population as a driving factor, or you simply want to feel a little more empowered when interpreting the huge flow of information coming our way during this time, I'm confident that what follows is really going to help you out. So let's get into it. As I mentioned up front, we're talking specifically about thematic choropleth mapping. In Tableau, you'll know this visualization technique as a filled map. Again, that's taking a metric, we pop that on color, we select map as the mark type. This is going to give us a map that uses color to show variation in the underlying data. The choropleth, the filled map's primary goal, is to allow a user to compare that variation in the data in space. And here's where things get sticky. Because if we only plot the raw values in the data, we don't have a standard baseline for the comparison that we wish to see. So let's look at some examples here. Well, we've got COVID-19 cases in Europe up on screen. We have a muted color palette. Aesthetically, that works well with the data to allow it to speak rather than kind of yell, scream, incite panic. So that's a good aesthetic touch, and it's reasonably well put together visually as a map, but it's plotting raw numbers rather than rates. Another example, in the UK this time. Red's used as the base color. Now, red palettes really we ought to stay away from because of what they signify. But in any case, the use of colors to code the data here is rendered redundant because we're seeing the UK within a global context, but that context isn't shown in the graphic. Therefore, we're not seeing the variation in colors on this map. Using color to code the data here isn't offering us anything. And the bigger picture, again, is that raw values are used rather than rates. This is a graphic from the BBC. It's a global, well-respected broadcasting organization, but it is still delivering misinformation. And actually, any visualization that presents the data in this way, using raw numbers on a filled map, any visualization that does that is absolutely meaningless. It doesn't matter the source. No matter how much you trust it, it is meaningless. Now, here's the key issue. At the time this map was created, there were 51 cases of coronavirus in London. Now, how can we tell if that's something to be concerned about? 51 cases out of a total population of 60 seems severe. But what if the population is not 60, but 6,000 or 60,000? How does that change the view that we take? And what about the southeast of England, here? Or Scotland? How many people live here? Is 18 comparable to London's 51? Is it worse? We have no way of comparing these because there isn't a baseline. And this issue isn't just something that arises with COVID-19, nor is it just an issue with mapping disease. Let me show you this example using the global indicators dataset that comes preloaded in Tableau Desktop. I've used the filled map approach to visualize the raw values for carbon dioxide emissions for 2010. Now, looking at this example, we see China is the darkest color, so China seems to be churning out really high values of CO2. And by raw number in 2010, it was. And those raw values, like, they might be something that you want to visualize. That's fine. You want to create a league table, go for that. But the choropleth, the thematic map, is not the technique to do that. This mapping technique is designed to help people compare relative values through space. If you want to show raw numbers, you need to do something different. Hey, keep it simple, go for a table. go for circles sized proportionally to the absolute values of the underlying data, like I've done here. That means relative size of underlying areas isn't an issue. And actually, this is a far better technique to allow us to gauge absolute order in the data. But the choropleth, the filled map, it's not the right technique for raw values. And here's why. Each area that we have on this map, on this base map, each country is a different size with a different population. Nations that are large in size will appear more prominent, more important, simply because they're big. Small nations can be rendered almost invisible, even if the data attached to them is significant. So let's focus in here. So China looks to emit a huge amount of CO2, but China also has about a sixth of the entire world's population. And that population is clearly going to be driving these CO2 emissions. So all we've done here, if we use color rather than the proportional symbols, is create a map that really just shows the population of each country in 2010. If we want to use this choropleth type map to investigate how CO2 emissions vary in space from country to country, we need to create a standard baseline that will allow us to do that. And because CO2 is driven by industrialized populations, we're going to use population as that standard baseline. So we create a CO2 per capita or per person field by taking the total emissions for each country and dividing them by the total population of that country to get something like this, which is a carbon dioxide emissions per capita thematic map. And to really appreciate the changes that I've enacted by performing that population correction, we gotta look at these side by sides. So look how things change from left to right. China's significance in the map has dropped away, and instead we pick out the United States. Even corrected for population, its per capita emissions are large. Australia jumps in. Australians are massive into coal. Also look, we've got the Gulf states where the bulk of the world's oil comes from. We now have their significance coming into play despite their small physical area. We're now able to pick them out. And from this, we can make accurate assertions about more or less because we have a standard baseline to compare each country to another. And this principle is the same whether we have CO2 or GDP, gross domestic product, which is another global indicator, or crime across the United States. If your final map is indistinguishable from a map of straight population, something's not right. And it inevitably is a failure to adjust the data for population. Look, let's compare left and right. Population by state on the left and violent crimes by state on the right. The pattern looks almost identical. For population, large numbers in California, Texas, Florida, and New York. And for violent crime, large numbers in California, Texas, Florida, and New York. So I'll go in for that key nugget again. If you plot your data on a map and it looks identical or almost identical to a map of population, something's probably gone wrong. And this is what we should be seeing at the state level for crime rates. Got population again on the left. California, Texas, Florida, New York. But these are replaced on the right-hand side with prominence of Nevada, New Mexico, and Tennessee. Once we adjust for population, in this case, it's per 1,000 population. Now, there's also a long conversation to be had about aggregating or grouping data like these to such large arbitrary areas as states, but we're going to have to save that for another time. Circling back around to disease mapping, that rule about correcting for population applies here as well. Rates that are adjusted for population are the only metric that makes sense on a filled map, whether we're looking globally at the country level or subnationally, as I've done here, for provinces in China. The only way we can assess relative importance is to have a baseline created from population. For things like disease mapping, where the number of cases might be small and the populations are often large, it's common to give a per 1,000 or per 100,000 person metric rather than per person. But like this. Again, you can see that correction for population is the same inside these brackets. We take the total number of cases per province, this time in China, divide that by the total population of that province. That all gets wrapped, that standardization calculation, in a bracket. And just to make it a bit more understandable kind of to the human eye, we multiply that by 100,000 to get a population adjusted metric. Now, as I said right at the outset, to produce accurate thematic maps, this step, it's a non-optional. It's not an aesthetic choice, it is a fundamental treatment of the data. And the final thing I'd like us to think about today is how the default map view in Tableau introduces distortion to any map that includes or is influenced by population. In any of the examples I've shown you today, carbon dioxide, GDP, gross domestic product, crime rates, disease, they all fall into this category. Now, by default, Tableau will squash the 3D spherical Earth down to a two-dimensional object to display on the screen using a specific technique. That's called a Web Mercator projection. Now, this isn't the only technique that exists to squash the 3D Earth down to a flat two-dimensional object. There are many. But the Tableau default, as you see on the screen, is a really common way to display the world. You might have seen it at school, like historically people are used to seeing it this way. It's also quite low labor to render on a screen or on internet services that provide interactive maps. But it's totally unrealistic with respect to the size of countries as we move from the equator towards the poles. So look, check this out. Tableau's default gives us Greenland and the continent of Africa at about the same size. But Africa is actually 15 times larger. And this cool little web tool that I'm going to show you right now helps us to understand exactly how things are warped in a Web Mercator projection, Tableau's default. Watch again, here I've got Greenland selected in this kind of orange color, and it looks about the same size as the continent of Africa. But as we drag it closer to the equator, it becomes corrected to its true size, which isn't, in fact, the size of the continent of Africa. It's more like the size of the country of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC. Now watch as I drag it up again, the area appears to expand, but that's just an artifact of this Web Mercator system. We're going to show another example, and get ready because this is really going to blow your mind. Let's take a look at Russia on the map. So we're going to check out what's happening with Russia using the same Web Mercator projection, Tableau's default. It appears to be one of the most prominent land masses on Earth. But at the equator, its true size and shape becomes more apparent. Now, the question you're probably thinking about is, like, why do I care about all this? Why do I care about the way in which Tableau displays countries or that they're sized slightly differently? Well, it's not just about display, it's about distortion. So for any map of population, Web Mercator, which is Tableau's default, doesn't support our filled maps purpose because these distortions, the ones that we're looking at, lead to people over or underestimating size of areas relative to one another. And that has the effect of propagating our impressions of less or more due simply to the projection. So what we're saying here is that purely by the default display in Tableau, we're not giving our viewers the best opportunity to gain the greatest insight into the data. And by doing this rather than this, we're misleading the viewer. And what we have on screen here is a different method of squashing the 3D Earth to 2 dimensions, one that preserves the relative areas of countries. and it's called an equal area projection. So the big takeaway point here is that even after we've done the hard yards on correcting the raw values to get rates, we're still not done. The work's not done. There's another step to take before we can map with anything like a clear conscience. Unfortunately, within the time frame that I've got here, it's not going to be possible to take you through a how-to for sourcing, adjusting, and using reprojected data and base maps. So I do apologize about that, but I do have links to some YouTube content that will step-by-step guide you through. And with that, I'm kind of all out of goodies and all out of time. Your take-home points for the last 20 or so minutes on filled or thematic maps in Tableau. First, do no harm. Ask yourself if you need to create a map and if you need to publish it. Is there a better way to display the data? Is the better way to do nothing with the data? These are really important points to think about. Second, always standardize raw values by something when creating a filled map, whether that's population or maybe a unit area. If we don't do this, the map does not allow a user to compare values in space, and that is the filled map's primary purpose. Lastly, try and think a bit more carefully about equal area projections to avoid distortions that will alter people's perception of what they see. I've got a bunch of resources here that you can take to use and try and develop your skills further in spatial analysis and mapping in Tableau, including the YouTube guide I mentioned a moment ago from us here at the Information Lab. I'd also actively encourage you all to respectfully discuss and debate these issues as a community. Like, I'd be delighted to be nudged on Twitter for this, but you can also find me online at mapswith80mac.com or at theinformationlab.co.uk. So please do reach out if you need anything or you just want to have a bit of a chat. And look, thanks so much again for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
All right. Well, 80, holy cow. You've blown my mind, number one. The true size, wow, that was amazing. And I think it was so great how it really showed us what we have learned or what we've been told about mapping and landmass. So that was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I do have a couple of questions. Sure. One is, could you point us specifically to the resources that would help us understand more about the map projection issue you talked about?
Yeah, of course. That's a really big issue, and there's tons of stuff out there. But it'll be useful just now to spend a little bit of time guiding you towards some of the stuff that you might find useful. So first off, just to look back on that map projection issue for everyone, that's the final thing I talked about just then with the true size website, that the concept there are many different ways to squash down a 3D Earth to make it flat. The way Tableau does that is called Web Mercator, but it's got some of these unfortunate distortions of size associated with it, especially towards the poles. But if you're after something to read, I'd get started with Sarah Battersby's blog series on working with projected data in Tableau. If you'd rather have something to watch, you can go in with my video series on YouTube, which is linked here in the final slides. And you'll want to start with the videos titled Special Edition Mini-Series Map Projections. If you want something to immediately play with, go on over to this website called Dirty Reprojectors, which sounds a bit inappropriate, but it's not. You can download reprojected GeoJSON data, and that's a data type that you can read directly into Tableau. So if you take a look at what I'm showing now, you can choose to download like base maps and a whole bunch of different projections. So I'll choose Mercator, which is what we're used to. Bam, that's a Tableau default, but I can go through all of these many options and download something, download something totally different. So you get a base map. In the choose your data bit, there's also the option to download some kind of assets for those countries, populated places, for examples. That will give you the dots. So you could download both a base map and the populated places and make something that looks kind of crazy, but also you could make it in Tableau.
Wow. Well, wow. Thank you so much. We are super fortunate that we had you on today to share with us your expertise. And I love how you provided a really good challenge to us and that kind of tough love approach of mapping, especially something so serious like the coronavirus. So thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Hey, you're absolutely welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. Okay, so now we are going to move over to our next presenter. I want to bring up my slides for Mark here. And we have Mark Reed, who is going to talk with us about animated transitions in Tableau. Now, Mark is a Tableau Zen master and a data visualization developer at Lloyds Banking Group in London. And he's been using Tableau since early 2017. And as Adi mentioned, he was part of the data school program at the Information Lab. So Mark has been experimenting with these new features and is a frequent contributor to the beta program. And he also writes about Tableau and data visualization at dataviz, that's with an S, .blog. So datavis.blog. So Mark, go ahead and take it away.
Great, thanks, Emily. So hi, everyone. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here. So hopefully you can see that. So yeah, again, thanks for joining. My name is Mark Reed. I'm a Tableau developer at Lloyds Banking Group here in London. And I'm just going to be talking through one of the new features that came into the product this year in version 2020.1, and that is Viz animations or animated transitions. So to get started, I'm just going to walk through a series of charts actually without any transitions. And I'm just going to ask you to follow along as best you can as we go through these charts. So we're starting off here with a view of the average monthly sales over the last 10 years. And you can see in 2009, the average monthly sales were about 340 million. And then in 2018, we'd increased up to 1.3 billion. In this next view, I'm just going to change to the actual monthly sales. And you can see if I add labels at the start and end of each of these years, you start to see the seasonality coming into those views now. And you see that towards the end of each year, we have a spike in sales as we move into the holiday season. This next view is just making it more easy to compare the individual months over the year, so it can more easily compare, for example, all of the Decembers and all of the Novembers, etc. And you can see in the last 3 years in particular, we had a bit of a jump in sales in November and December. This next year view is enabling me to actually combine all of the sales up for each month over the 10 years. So you can see, for example, the total sales for December over the 10 years was about 11 billion. And I can actually just break that out, and we can see that for December we had about 5.5 billion of sales for non-store retailing, and the remainder for the other categories that you can see on the screen there. Okay, so I'm guessing that might have been a bit challenging to follow along to. And some of the challenges that you may have faced would be around what's shown on the screen here. So we had, for example, we were changing the granularity of time. We were changing from a yearly view to a monthly view of the data. We're also changing from a continuous view of dates to a discrete view, by which I mean the years are running sequentially, and then we changed to showing them in parallel with the lines stacked on top of each other. We're also changing the granularity of the dimensions, so we were looking at sales by year, and then we looked at total sales, aggregated, and then we changed that to sales by category. So how can we help to reduce some of those challenges? Well, one of the things we can use is something called object constancy. And this is described by Mike Bostock, who's the creator of D3, as when a graphical element that represents a particular data point can be tracked visually through the transition. And this lessens the cognitive burden by using pre-attentive processing of motion rather than sequential scanning of labels. So I touched on pre-attentive attributes there, and you might have seen a slide similar to this in the past, and it includes things such as size. You think about the size of circles in scatter plots, or the length of bars here, or we've got color in the lower left. And I'm sure you use many of these in your day-to-day work, whether it be in Tableau or other tools. And I was reminded of a couple of these pre-attentive attributes in a talk I went to see last year by John Schwabish, and he was talking about the use of animation in data visualization. And they're the two in the lower right, which I've just highlighted. So it's this new feature that's come into Tableau, these animated transitions, that enables us to start to make use of these pre-attentive attributes of motion. So the way the animations are accessed in Tableau, we have a new side panel. So like at the moment you have a side panel for formatting or for the data source. We now have one for animations. And this allows you to turn the animations on or off. You can also change the duration of the animations, and there's some presets for fast or medium or slow, and a custom setting. And then you can also change the style of the animation. So you can have a simultaneous or sequential, and I'll talk a bit more about those in a second. And then you also have the option to change all of these properties at the individual view level or for the workbook overall. Okay, so to see those in action, let's go back and look at those same charts again, this time with the transitions in place, and we'll see if you find it a bit easier to follow along. Okay, so we're starting off with this average monthly sales over the last 10 years. I'm just going to transition that into the actual monthly sales now. And as you do that, you can start to see the seasonality come through. We've got the labels here at the start and end of each year. And I'm now going to change the view such that I can more easily compare the individual months. So I want all of the Januaries to move over to the left and all the Decembers to move over to the right. And you'll be able to track that as that happens and follow each of the years. Okay, so now when we do that, we can more easily compare the Decembers for each of the 10 years. We can see that particularly in the last 3 years, we had a bit of a jump in sales in the November and December months. Okay, the next thing I want to do is actually combine all these cells together. So I'm going to animate this now and move all of these lines together into one larger line. And when I do that, we can see that the total sales for the December month was about 11 billion. And then finally, I'm just going to break this line out now. So we'll break out that 11 billion by category this time. And when you split that out, you can see that we had about 5.5 billion for non-store retailing and the remainder for the other categories there. So hopefully you found that a bit easier to follow along to those transitions. And there's another quote from Mike Bostock here who says, the animated transitions are pretty, but they also serve a purpose. They make it easier to follow the data. And that's hopefully what we're able to do in that last set of charts there. So I'm just going to point you towards a couple of conference videos here. So these were shown at the Tableau conference last year, 2019. And you can easily find these through Google if you just Google for Tableau conference Viz animations. And they go into a bit more detail about the history of how this functionality was developed. And they also served as some inspiration for the series of charts that I just showed you. Okay, so we'll look at a few more examples now. This time we're going to look at sorting of data. So again, I've switched off the transitions initially here. And you can see in the top left, I'm sorting these measures in the view by sales. I'm going to change the sort order to profit and then to discount. And I'm just going to ask you to follow along here and just pick one of the subcategories on the left-hand side. And I want you to try and follow that subcategory as I change the sort order. So I'm going to change that to profit now. So just try and find the one that you were following. And then I'm going to change it to discount. And again, try and follow the one that you picked. And then finally, we'll go back to sales. So it's quite difficult to follow these things without any transitions because the label actually just disappears and reappears in its new location. So you really have to kind of start at the top of that list and work your way down and read every one until you find yours, which is a bit time consuming. So let's try that again now with the transitions turned on. So just again, pick one of these subcategories on the left and we'll change the sort order and I'll change that to profit now. Okay, and then follow the same subcategory as we change the sort order again. Okay, and I'm sure you will have found that much easier to follow along to, so you can see the effect of having these transitions in place when you're presenting information in this way. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about the stages of the transitions now. So Tableau has split these out into 4 steps, as you can see on the screen. So exit is talking about where data is filtered out of the view or where there's no data. Moving is actually talking about, it could be a resizing. So for example, if you have a bar which represents 5,000 in one year and in the next year represents 10,000, that bar needs to resize, and that is the movement that we're talking about there. The next one is sorting, and that is where bars, for example, might need to change position, and we saw that in the previous example. And then finally, we have entering, so that's where new data is coming into the view, or for example, it's being filtered in. And there's two types of transition styles. So you have simultaneous, and that's where those 4 steps that I just talked about all happen at the same time. Or you have the sequential style, and that's where they happen after each other, one at a time. So the second method is slightly slower, but it can be clearer to view. And we'll have a demonstration now of what both of those look like. So we're back to the same view now, but in the top right, you can see I have a filter on the segment. And I'm just going to go ahead and filter out the consumer segment. So that's obviously going to affect the values in the view. They're going to reduce. So you're going to see those bars change size and resort based on their new values. So just I'll filter that out now. Okay, so you will have seen some of the steps there. You probably will have seen the bars resize, as in move, and then you will have seen them resorting. Now, what you might have missed, because everything's happening at the same time, is actually 2 of the subcategories exited the view, and that's step 1 in the transitions. So I'm going to filter consumer back into the view now, see if you can try and pick up what those 2 subcategories were. Okay, it was still quite hard to see, actually. It was they're down the bottom of the page there on the left. It's tables and chairs. So what we're going to do now is actually change to using the sequential transitions, and you're going to find this a lot easier to follow along to now. So I'll do exactly the same thing. I'll filter out consumer, and you're going to see the different steps as they occur. So first you're going to see the exiting, then you're going to see the resizing, and then the sorting. So we'll do that now. You see tables and chairs exit, then the bars resize, and then they sort. So I'll filter them back in now, and we'll see those same steps. They happen in the same order. This time there's no exiting because there's nothing to exit. Something's going to filter back into the view. So what you're going to see is the bars resize, and then you're going to see the sorting, and then you're going to see those 2 subcategories enter the view, which is the 4th step. So we have the resizing, then the sorting, and then the tables and chairs enter the view there. Okay, so these transitions will work across dashboards. So if you have multiple charts in your dashboard, they'll happen across all. So I've just switched them off again here just to be able to compare easily. So I'm going to filter out furniture in this view, which is the blue category. So in this first case, it will just disappear and it will change the view. And then I'll filter it back in, and we'll go in reverse. Okay, and then we'll switch to using simultaneous transitions. So here, the furniture will filter out, and as it happens, at the same time, the other categories will move into that space. So we'll do that now. And then I'll filter furniture back in, and the other categories will filter out of the way, and at the same time, furniture will filter back into the view. Okay. So that's simultaneous transitions, and we'll try that now with sequential just so you can see the difference. And this time when I filter out furniture, it's going to completely disappear from the view and leave a blank space, and then only once that's happened will the other categories move over to fill that space. Okay, and I'll filter furniture back into the view, so technology and all the other categories will filter, will move out of the way, make space, and then finally furniture will filter back into the view there. Okay, so we're going to go and look at some other examples using scatter plots in a moment, but before that, I'll just share a few examples from the Tableau community. So this feature was really embraced by the community when it was released into the beta late last year, and there's been quite a number of examples being shared, so we'll just look at a few of those now. And I should just say some of these are a bit more advanced, so they're not kind of out-of-the-box examples. There might be some extra calculations or even some data work that needs to be done to make these work, but it's just to give you an idea of the things, the kind of things that are possible with this new feature. So this first one is from Luke Stanke, and he's created this view here. It's split in 2. You have the lower half, which is kind of a zoomed out overview of your data, and you can click to select any part of this, and then the top half will kind of zoom in and transition across and scroll to locate the data, sort of the part of the data that you selected. And he's written a blog post. I've got a link to the bottom of the page here, and all these slides will be shared. You'll be able to go to that blog and be able to understand how that was created. And this next one is from Neil Richards, and he's animated a part of a chess game here. And I really like this one. It's quite a good idea. I think you could incorporate this into a larger dashboard and maybe have some other metrics around, for example, how these two players managed to reach this part of a tournament. You know, what was their history, what were their other wins and losses and so forth. So it might be an extra, dynamic addition to a dashboard. Okay, this next one is from Alex Varlamov, and if you follow Alex on Twitter, you'll know that he's been sharing some pretty incredible examples of animations. And this one, he's transitioning between different chart types. So you've got from lines to stacked bars and so on. And again, I have a link underneath there to Alex's Tableau Public. Definitely recommend checking that out. And then this final one is from Ludovic. So Ludovic created this dashboard for Operation Fistula. And again, really nice example. You can see as you the filters are changed on the left there. You can see the charts on the right slowly transition to pick up their new values. So it's quite a subtle animation, but I think it really adds something to the dashboard, kind of really brings it to life. So really nice example. And again, there's a link below there. We can find that one. And there's many more examples out on Twitter. If you go over there and search for the hashtag #VizAnimations, you'll be able to find many more examples. For example, this one from Charlie Hutchinson here. And there's many more. You can also use that hashtag on Tableau Public as well. Okay, so we'll look at a few more examples now using some scatter plots. So I've set this view up with years on the pages shelf. So we're going to move forward through another 3 years worth of data. So all of the circles in the scatter plot are going to move 3 times. So I've switched off the animations again here just to contrast. And I'm just going to ask you to pick one of the circles here and try and follow it as you move through the next 3 years of data. So I'll hit the play button now. Okay, and I'm guessing you probably found that quite hard. All of these circles were jumping all over the place. So to try and help out, I'm going to add one of the pre-attentive attributes that we talked about earlier, which is color. And I'm just going to play this again and see if you find it a bit easier to follow along this time. So I'm going to hit play now. Just pick one of these circles and we'll go. Okay, so hopefully you found that a little bit easier. It's obviously much quicker for the brain to process the color than it is to read the individual labels. And that's obviously the reason that color is a pre-attentive attribute. So this time I'm going to add in the transitions, and you're going to find this a lot easier now. So again, just pick one of these circles and follow along and try and track it through the next 3 years of data just to see how much easier it is. Okay, and I'm sure you agree that was tremendously easier. So really makes a huge difference. So I think you can start to think about if you're presenting this kind of information, particularly in something like a scatter plot where things are moving around, having these transitions in play is going to make a huge difference to your audience in enabling them to try and follow along to the story that you're telling. And it's so powerful, in fact, that we can actually remove the other attributes. So we can remove the color, we can remove the labeling on the marks as well, and you'll still be able to follow along almost just as easily. So just to demonstrate that, we'll do this one more time. Just pick one of the circles that you see on the screen here, and we'll play that through the next 3 years of data. So I'll hit play now. Okay, so hopefully you found that just as easy to follow along. So again, these are really powerful feature that we've had added into the product here, which is great to see. And of course, this is not new. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the work with Hans Rosling, in particular the TED talk that he gave back in 2006, where he was showing the development of countries over time based on various metrics with the use of these animated scatter plots, which you can see in the background here. And I remember seeing this talk a number of years ago and being really struck by the effectiveness of the presentation, obviously partly due to Hans's quite unique storytelling style, but also due to the actual animations that we're showing in the charts. So when this feature came out into the beta at the end of last year, it was one of the first things I wanted to try and replicate. So I will finish up with this final animation. As I say, this is my attempt to reproduce some of these charts using the same data from Gapminder. And as this plays through, I will just talk through some of the features as well that are used in Tableau in the background. So we start off with this view with these large circles representing different regions of the world. And there's some parameter actions in place here that such that when you click on them, you can start to see the countries underneath them. There's some custom buttons in the top right to explain all of the circles out to all of the countries. And then you can hit play on the page's shelf, and you can start to see those move through the years now, and you can see the births per woman decreasing and the life expectancy increasing. You can hover over these, see the summary metrics. You can change the level of detail again, see them either at the country level or at the region level. Okay, and then we're going to head back and move back to the first year again. And I'm actually going to now change the measures on the axes. So we're going to put GDP per capita on the x-axis and child survival on the y-axis. Change to the country level and then hit play and have these move through again. And this time you'll see that the GDP per capita is increasing and the child survival is increasing as we move through the years here. And there's some hover actions in the lower half of the screen which allows you to see the individual countries that make up those regions. And it's quite interesting when you see there that you see the spread, the variation of the countries that make up the region. I think that was one of the points that Hans was really trying to make in his presentation, that sometimes we can think of these regions as being quite homogeneous, whereas in fact there is actually huge variation within them. So this visualization is on my Tableau Public profile if you want to explore this a bit more, and you can download that and reverse engineer and have a look at how that all works. Okay, so that's all the content I wanted to get through today. I'll just add that I do have a blog post on animations which goes into a bit more detail, has some links out to various resources, so you can find that on my blog, which is on the screen. And also the other thing to mention, if you're interested in getting involved in the beta program, if you head over to tableau.com/getbeta, you can download that new beta version and play with some of the new features. So hope that was useful. Thanks again for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, well, thank you so much, Mark. That was really informative. And I like how you went through showing how the animations are working. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I've heard that not all parts of a visualization animate currently. So could you expand or clarify that for us?
Yes, that's right. So there are a few bits of the animation of the charts that don't animate at the moment. So trying to recall what these are. I think there's for example, the pie mark, the polygons, text marks, I think do not animate at this time. And there's a few of the other things as well. There's axes and headers, reference lines also don't animate, but the other things do. So yeah, I think they may come into be animated in future releases, but not 100% about that.
Okay. And then another quick question for you. Can you customize the speed and the timing of the animation?
You can, yes. So in the control panel, you have the option to, there's a setting for the duration of the transition. So there are some presets in there, which I think are just fast, medium, slow, if I recall. But there's also a custom setting as well. So you can enter your own value, and I think you can go up to about 10 seconds in there. So you can have them run really slowly if you want to, yeah. So there is some customization settings there.
Oh, awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for your talk today. It was really informative. And it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how people embrace animations in not only their creative visualizations and their hobby visualizations, but at work as well. So thank you so much for that.
Great. Thanks, Emily.
All right. So we're going to kick it over to our next speaker. But before we do, I just want to give Zach a warm introduction. Zach is he is the lead of, there we go. So Zach is the lead of the Tableau Center of Excellence at JP Morgan Chase. And he's been working with the software for almost 10 years, which that's a really long time in Tableau world. But so Zach is going to tell us everything we need to know about Tableau Server in 20 minutes. So I am looking forward to this. Welcome, Zach Geis.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. All right, so I'll go ahead and present my screen. Just one second. Okay, so yeah, we're not going to talk about data at all in this session. We're not going to talk about line charts or bar charts or workbooks or anything like that. We're going to talk about Tableau Server. And as Emily mentioned, we're not just going to talk about Tableau Server, we're going to talk about everything in Tableau Server. So I've definitely challenged myself. I just hit my stopwatch. This is actually my first time going through these slides. So hopefully everybody, give me some luck on this. We're going to get through the entire not going to spend a lot of time about myself. We're going to get back to the slide at the end. I've been using Tableau for a while, especially Tableau Server. I love the product, and I love to speak about and evangelize Tableau Server. So you're going to notice that I'm going to talk pretty fast as I go through this. What I'm going to probably say is, if you don't catch everything, go back. We're going to have this on YouTube. We're going to present the slides. We're going to share it, and you can always find me and talk about things. But just because of the scope and the content that I have in here and the fact that I have to show you everything, we're going to go really, really quick. So the basic, or what's a server? I've structured this presentation into 3 different areas based on the kind of level of maturity and usage of Tableau Server. This is the basics. This is somebody that really doesn't know a lot about Tableau Server. They might have used Tableau Desktop, but they don't know really anything about how to use Tableau Server or construct it or anything like that. So knowing the basic, what exactly is Tableau Server? So Tableau Server is a storage server that's meant to share workbooks and store content. It's available via URL on your browser. Has a lot of options for securing content, scheduling content, publishing and making things available for users, embedding things, and we're going to go through pretty much all of those things as we continue through the slides. So first, it's very important to know how to actually publish in Tableau. So I'm going to switch over here to my handy dandy Tableau desktop. What I've got in front of me is my sample Superstore Tableau workbook. I'm just going to go up here. I've already created it. I like what I've got. Server, publish workbook. I'm going to actually publish to a Tableau online environment that I've got. I might want to change some of these settings just to establish security, maybe add some schedules, things like that. But for this case, I'm just going to go ahead and publish. It's going to come up, say it's publishing my content. We'll give it a moment. It's pretty fast. Going to pop over and actually flip over to Tableau Server and show us a presentation and a preview of what we've got now on Tableau Server. So same kind of stuff that I had over there in Tableau Desktop. I can interact, I can click through, I can see the things. It's all there, it's available, and it's now a URL that I can share with others. So we'll flip back now to my presentation. So it's important to know that there's different flavors of Tableau Server. It's not just Tableau Server itself. There's different options here. So traditionally, you're probably going to have on-premises Tableau Server. That is something that's hosted, it's managed, it's on your own internal server environment, whether that's physical or virtual. It's there managed by your company. You also have Tableau Online. That's where I just published. It's something that's hosted and managed by Tableau themselves, the vendor, and then it's made available to you as a user to publish to. It's kind of hosted by them, offers a little bit less customization, but it takes the management and responsibility of Tableau from you, puts it back on Tableau. Tableau Public, you've probably heard of this before. This is basically a free version of Tableau Online. You can publish and make anything available, but there's no security and no way to secure content. You can also publish Tableau to the cloud. You can make it available there in different cloud hosting options, just so you have the entire bevy of different scenarios that you might want to publish Tableau Server for. It's also important to know that you have different license models for Tableau. They're really in 2 different areas. You have user-based, which is more of a subscription model where based on the users that you have, you can add them to the server, and you can add as much server cores as you want, basically stand up as much Tableau as you want. You're just paying for the users. The flip of that is core-based, where you have unlimited users, but you're paying for the cores themselves. One thing that's unique and nice about the core-based license is the ability to open a guest account. So if you like to open something for everybody to view, rather than listing them and adding them as a named user, you can open up the guest account and give anybody at your company access. It's also important to know that there's a lot of objects and types of things inside of Tableau Server. This is not everything, but these are probably the things that you need to know the most so that you can go into a conversation educated about what's there. So we have the workbooks. That's what I just opened in Tableau Desktop. It's the actual content, visualization, it's things like that. The data sources are the connections or proxies to connections to the actual data. So this could be a live connection to data. It could be an extract, it could be a hyperfile or things like that. You have ways of delineating access and actually, putting things into areas. So you have sites. I think of as walls between content. There's no overlap here. It's really can almost be thought of as servers within your server. They also are addressed inside of the URL, so they can make modifications to the URL and things like that. Projects are really just a lot lower grain. These are more like folders, and they're ways to separate content and separate users, things like that. You have schedules and tasks. So tasks are things that are going to be scheduled, like data refreshes, alerts, subscriptions. And then you have schedules themselves, which you actually throw the task on schedules and have them run on a recurring basis. And finally, you have users and groups. So user is, of course, an individual user that has access to Tableau, and a group is a way that you structure and group users so that they have specific levels of access to the content itself. When you publish to Tableau, you'll probably notice that you have a toolbar. It was just there when I showed Tableau. There's a lot of unique options up here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but these are things that are unique to Tableau Server that aren't available in Tableau Desktop. So I can create a custom view. That's right here in the view original. I can set alerts based on thresholds. I can create metrics based on fields that I really like and care for. I can subscribe and basically get a PDF sent to me on a set basis. I can share, I can download and add comments just so I can have a natural experience with my users there as well. Moving into the user roles, so we'll spend a lot of time on the actual roles themselves. So a creator, an explorer, and a viewer are the three different types of licensed users that you get on Tableau. A creator license is someone like a server admin, a site admin, or a creator. Server admins have access to do everything on the server. A site admin is the same thing, but just at a site level. And then a creator you can think of as really just a publisher, somebody that can go into Tableau Desktop like I just did and publish something up to Tableau Server. An Explorer license is something in the middle. So you can have site admins, but mostly you're going to have the Explorer themselves. And this is somebody that doesn't have access to Tableau Desktop, but they can, on the web, actually create their own visualizations, connect to data, and play around with things like that. And then a viewer is just a traditional user, somebody that should be getting the URL and getting the content from giving them, and just have those traditional things that they can do, view, interact, filter, things like that. So that was the basics. The term I hear a lot is accidental admin. I think this area is for you is kind of the intermediate level. I like the icon here because it kind of shows you know that there's a lot going on and you don't know all the things that you can do yet. And I'm going to try and help you out with that a little bit. So permissions. Permissions is a tough area, and probably I could spend an entire 20-minute session on this. The way to think of it is you can permission by object types. So you can give permission to the projects, the workbooks, the data sources, etc. You can establish what a user is. So just going back to what I just mentioned, so explorers, can they publish, can they administrate, things like that. And then you can go a little bit more fine-tuned. So you can set, can they view, can they filter, can they download data, can they set roles and set custom views and all those kind of extra features as well. TSM. So TSM is basically your module to manage Tableau Server in general. So relatively new. It came in 2018. This gives you the ability to jump in on the web and manage your server. So you can address the process topology, which I'll get to later in the session. You can update settings like security and identity access. You can see what's happening on the server with some of the status screens. You can even see your licenses and things like that. So you can manage all of that in one central user interface. Ask Data is a nice thing to have inside of Tableau, another thing that's relatively new. So Ask Data allows you to hop into a data source like I'm doing right here and start to ask questions. So, what are my sales by category in 2019? So naturally ask questions of my data. It's going to pop up with some examples that it thinks I want to do. And if I click that, it's going to bring me into a separate window where I can actually start to play around with this. So somebody that maybe wants to have more access to their data and ask some questions, but doesn't want the full feature set of something like Tableau Desktop, can jump here and Ask Data and start to play with things like this. So maybe I just realized, I want to see my region as well. I can do things like that. You'll see some of the things pop up as I change them. I can see them in different chart types. I can also save these depending on my role, so I can share these with others as well. So Tableau also, aside from all of the server-based components, is available via Tableau Mobile. So there is a native application that allows you via a mobile device or an iPad or anything like that, you can get a native experience that's going to size up to what you have and include other features as well. So you can see Tableau dashboards in a read-only offline version. There's other things as well. Just much more of a native experience rather than just sizing for a mobile device friendly size. I won't spend a lot on prep because that's actually the next session. The biggest thing when it comes to Tableau Server is the ability to conduct Tableau prep flows. So with Tableau prep Conductor, you can actually schedule workflows and put them on the server and have them run through and do any of your data processing, manipulation, run through, spit out a extract for a Tableau workbook, and off you go. So you don't have to spend a lot of time running that manually. You can have that on a schedule. And that leads into two of the add-ons for Tableau Server. So Tableau Server has the base vanilla sort of application, but it also has two add-ons. The first is server management. This comes with two general things. One is the resource utilization screens, which is on the left. It shows you a lot of things that are happening on your server and across servers. And it shows you things like performance and which views are the resource hogs and things like that. Things that you would want to know as somebody that has a environment that you want to keep tuned and optimized. This is a nice window into all those kind of things, as well as the content migration tool on the right. This allows you to, via the central UI, publish from one server environment and move it to another, just in a simple task. You can go through and make some changes through the workbook settings and permissions and subscriptions and things like that, all available here inside of the user interface. And then there's another add-on, which is the data management. I mentioned Tableau Prep Conductor, that is on the left side. So to do the Tableau Prep Conductor capabilities, you need the add-on to get that. You can get Tableau Prep Builder with just the regular license, but you'll need this for the Conductor side. The other side is we have an actual API that shows us some of the information about the data. So you have an API that allows you to connect through, see lineage, and see all the kind of things that are happening on your server, see where there's things that maybe are dependent on others and when there's issues with the data connections. So it's a lot of extra features within that as well. And then more of the kind of basic things that you want to know, there are the Tableau status screens. I didn't bring in screenshots of them, but you can, inside of Tableau Server, actually see some statuses of what's happening inside of your server. So as a site admin or as a server admin, you can jump into things like this, see traffic views. This is a very simple personal sandbox, so it's not going to have a lot of data, but this shows me what's happening inside of my Tableau server for me and my users. So I'm not going to spend time watching that wheel for whatever reason. We'll go ahead and flip back, but there's a lot of more information that you have in here, traffic to the data sources, what's happening for your specific users, what are they doing, what background jobs are taking a lot of time, what's happening with Tableau Prep, how much space am I using with Tableau, things of that nature. And if that doesn't give you everything that you want, you also have the ability to connect to the back-end Tableau Postgres environment, which is also known as a workbook repository and has information about what's happening on my server, who's connecting, what actual events in HTTP is happening, who's deleted what, things like that, what are the permissions, lots of things available there. Pretty much anything that you could think of that you need is available in this backend repository. And just with a couple simple commands, you can activate this, you can connect to it even with Tableau Desktop, and then you can publish this with your own Tableau content so it's available on a schedule. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Tableau Developer Program. This is a really great thing that I would encourage anybody that has any interest in Tableau Server to connect to. Just search Tableau Developer Program on Tableau or on Google, and you'll find this. Essentially, this is a program for anybody that has interest in Tableau Dev-like things, so server, some of the add-ons, the APIs, things like that. And one of the big benefits is it actually gives you a sandbox in Tableau Online. So it gives you a free public area where you can publish things, test the APIs and things like that. And in fact, that's where I published to when I was just showing the status screen. Okay, so there's kind of the middle area. We're getting a little bit more advanced as we go. So now we're in the advanced area. I've got this. I know what I'm doing. We're moving into a more complicated topic. So process topology. This is a very important thing if you are a server admin. It's very important to look at your nodes and the processes that you're running there. There's a lot of ways you can construct this so that you can work for performance, you can work for a lot of background jobs. It just is something that you really have to play around with. A couple things that I'll call out. I'm not going to go through every one of the processes that Tableau runs, but a couple things that are most important. VizQL server, this is what is rendering your workbook. This is if you have a lot of connections and a lot of concurrent users, you want a lot of VizQL so that you're getting fast performant responses. Cache, if you have a lot of things that are running again and maybe live connections and things like that you want to cache, you're going to use a lot of cache servers. Backgrounder, that is things that are running your background jobs. So your refreshes, your schedules, your alerts, things like that. A good thing to think about is separating your VizQL from your backgrounder, so you kind of have one node that's doing a lot of the rendering and one node that's doing a lot of the background response, so they're not conflicting. And again, there's a lot of things in here. I could spend a lot of time just talking about this specific topic, but those are some of the kind of gotcha moments. It's just separating VizQL and backgrounder. A good rule of thumb, if you're kind of thinking size, is 8 cores should traditionally handle about 80 to 100 concurrent users. And ways that you construct this, you can play around with. And a good thing with TSM is you can actually make hot changes. And that means that just jumping on this web UI, I can make changes to VizQL and background or some other things without even bringing down the server. Moving into extending Tableau, there's 3 general APIs that you're going to be using a lot when you work with Tableau Server. You're going to have the JavaScript API. This is where I want to embed Tableau inside of something else. I want to have a two-way communication between your application or your website and Tableau, where I can not only change things in Tableau based on parameters in the application, but change things in the application based on what I select inside of Tableau. Lots of cool things you can do with that. REST API, this is more programmatic things. These are things that you as a server admin want to think about. You want to think about cleaning things up, publishing things, deleting things on schedules, creating new sites programmatically, even creating a whole service to do deployments. All of those things can be done with the REST API inside of Tableau. And then finally, the extensions API. This is something that more on the desktop side, but you will have to connect those proxies on the server side. This is something that you want to build an application inside of Tableau. You want to have things like writing back to a database when I click on something, or generating natural language based on the marks that I select, things like that. Another important advanced topic is how you render the dashboard. Something you don't often think about, but there are different mechanisms for rendering the view when you click on a web URL for Tableau Server. Sometimes it's going to render from the server. It's going to do extra work and push it out to you. Sometimes it's going to render on your machine, and it might be slower regardless of which one you're doing. You want to keep that in mind. There is actually a very advanced formula that Tableau uses to define whether it should be server-side rendering or client-side rendering, but you can override that down at the bottom with these parameters that you add to your URL, just to basically say, okay, if I render this by the server, what's my performance look like? If I do it on the client side, what's it look like? And you can use those URLs when you pass them to end users so that you know what kind of experience they're going to get and know that you're pushing them to either the server or running it locally. Another thing that's worth mentioning is there's a lot of open source tools for Tableau, especially from the administration side. LogShark is one. This gives you the ability to connect your logs, which can often be terabytes of data every day, and actually visualize what's happening. The logs are very complex in Tableau. There's a lot of connections and connecting the dots that you have to do in there. This allows you to simply connect to it, pull it down into a Postgres environment, and then actually view what's happening. So see if there's specific errors, if there's things that you want to see real performance of what's happening inside those views. Another is Tableau. So a lot of times when you build a new environment, you want to simulate users. So this tool allows you to do a point and load simulation test. And actually point at a server and say, okay, what's it look like when I run 100 users? What's that look like when I run 500 users? Things like that. Tabmon, this is more machine side. So this is an agent that you install on your Tableau server to actually see a lot of things that are happening there. What are the process, what's it doing on the CPU and the memory and things like that? And how should I consider updating my Tableau server to accordingly? And then Scout, which is more of a impersonation tool where you can actually do more like testing of the view and run it on 2 different environments. What does it look like? Another last thing is currently going on right now. Another thing I wanted to mention is the Data Dev Challenge. If you have interest in Tableau Server, the Data Dev Challenge is going on right now and challenges you to use all the different APIs over the course of the next few weeks. And it's a good place to work in, understand the APIs, and actually work a little bit more with the Tableau sandbox. Finally, new things on the server. So a couple things to mention, not going to spend a lot of time here. There is a new utility called Login-Based License Management, LBLM for short, and this is a central service to manage all of your Tableau servers. Think of this as you don't have to share keys anymore. You can have one server that authenticates a user with Tableau Desktop and more. Mark just got done talking about animations. We have Tableau Mobile and the BlackBerry devices with a new section called Metrics where you can connect to favorited metrics. You can finally play your actual animations and things like that in the Tableau server. And there's TabPy, which allows you to connect officially to Tableau, Python, metrics, and connections and things like that. And I will stop 12 seconds after 20 minutes. That's everything about Tableau server.
Phew. Take a breath, Zach. All right, well, thank you for so much good information. I want to ask you a couple of questions that have come in. And one of them is, how does the server work in an active environment?
Yeah, so with Tableau Server, you notice that I have those different processes, the different servers. You can establish Tableau so it's kind of running active across two different environments. So think of this as kind of like a resiliency plan. You want to make sure if one data center goes out, you can bring the other one up very quickly. So it's very easy to build. You can even add a sort of round robin connector on top of things with a load balancer and switch easily between the two. It's just a matter of settings, and there's a lot of information on Tableau Server, Tableau's website.
The other question that came in was, can I install server on my own machine to test it?
Yeah, so Tableau actually recently updated their minimum requirements, and it requires a 4-core machine. As long as you have a pretty healthy size machine, you can do that. What I would probably recommend is going down the route of something like an AWS and something like that, and you can use the pre-version. So there's an area where you can test upcoming features. They actually give you a license for that version, and you can test it pretty easily by installing in like AWS.
Okay. Well, Zach, thank you so much. I am still processing everything that you have run through because that was so much information, but so much good information. And I know that people will be hitting you up to ask you more questions. You can follow Zach at ZachsViz, ZAKSVIZ on Twitter, and he's also part of the Columbus Tug. So Zach, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
All right. So let's see. Now that we have heard from Zach, we have one final presentation for today. And if you've been coming and going in today's DataFam Community Jam, don't worry, all of the presentations will be recorded and available on YouTube for you to watch later. So now we have Joe Villa. Joe is a senior Tableau instructor out of the San Francisco Bay Area. She's been in the BI industry for 20 years, and when she's not working with data sets, she is checking on recipes to bake. So I know she's going to cook up something good for us today, talking about the intro to Tableau prep. So Joe, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Emily. I'm going to share my screen for you guys. So hello, everyone. I wanted to thank Fringe Festival for this opportunity to present to all of you today, and especially with all of these awesome speakers that I followed. I'm excited to be a part of the cool DataFam Community Jam. I really had to say that out loud. A virtual meeting, and I wanted to again introduce myself. My name is Joanna Villa, and I go by Joe every time I introduce myself within the Tableau community. So I actually work for Tableau, and these are my fellow instructors, along with 200 plus certified partner instructors who are delivering the Tableau classes worldwide via the old school in-person classroom or through a virtual LED. The classes we delivered are the desktop classes, visual analytics, Tableau server, as well as Tableau prep. And maybe some of you watching could have been in one of our classes in the past. Normally, I would be delivering Tableau Prep Builder by walking you guys through a step-by-step guide on how to use the tool. But today, I'd like to walk you through a scenario that I think most of you can relate to. But first, one question does come to mind. Why was Tableau Prep Builder created? Since we were all introduced to the Tableau world through the desktop tool, our normal process to build our analysis or dashboard is to connect to the data and build from there. But we do run into some challenges in relation to how the data is structured. There has been two key trends that have been observed in the BI industry, the changes in data and people. First, related to data. The changes are we have more data. Data has been exponentially growing through the last few years, and we've recognized that. Data is more diverse. We actually can get it from our enterprise systems, departmentals, different departments, as well as our teams, and even our own personal data. And data is not centralized. Because data is everywhere and getting that data can be easier to access, it's really hard to establish these data warehouses these days because it takes some time to build. And just getting that data into a central location may not always be available. The other key trend is the change in people. People are expected to be analysts today, and data is given to them to make these decisions. And we see people getting access to tools to do their job, hence why we have desktop and prep. So one thing to consider is when we start to use Tableau tools, first we need to find that data, prepare the data, trust the data, and also govern it. One main fact I wanted to point out is an article here through the HBR is 80% of analyst time is actually spending in cleaning and discovering the data. The data I actually want to go ahead and explore with you here on the call is related to a TV show called Chopped. It's a cooking show with 4 contestants that compete by creating dishes with a secret ingredient, and they're judged after every meal preparation, appetizer, entree, and dessert. And one chef is chopped after each meal segment. The last chef standing wins $10,000. Now, basically, as you look at this data set, you'll probably recognize a few things that may come and stand out to you. There might be some data types that may not look like they match up. There's maybe some missing records that aren't available, or even some human input errors. And also you can see that some of these columns have a lot of data in it already. So this is just one example of many things that you guys might have be challenged with. So as we continue to look at this data, and before we even consider prep, we have a few questions that we need to ask ourselves as we start building out these data sets. Do I need to add more data into this particular set that I'm using now? Is my data at the same point in time that I need to actually do my analyst by? Do I want one master data set at the end of this? Or do I need to actually separate the data and then bring that data back after I've done a lot of shaping and cleansing? Whatever the case may be, however unique that challenge is, data preparation is almost as common, again, as data analysis itself. So here are a couple questions I want to answer with this particular data set. Which ingredient is the most dessert basket ingredient? We kind of relate it to the real world examples. One question that could be that you would ask is, what is the most common product SKU in my department? Another question, what is the most popular after-school program in a particular district? In that relation, let's go to my next question. What judges and contestants appear in multiple episodes together? If we kind of think this in parallel to like healthcare industry, maybe think about you have a pool of doctors and patients get to see these particular doctors in that network. The question that might come out of it is, how many instances did the same doctors and patients pair together during a visit. It doesn't hurt to ask questions beforehand. It actually helps with focus. And even the requirements of how you want to analyze that data will help you also structure your data. So we take a quick peek of actually how this data looked when we connected directly to the way the data was already given to us. You'll notice in the data source, everything just basically renders. But when we try to apply it to the question that we're asking for, a lot of the fields at the moment or anything in the data pane may not actually help us answer the question. I see multiple contestants, multiple judges field. Here's my dessert field that I want to see. And if I try to even do maybe a number of records for this, you can see that it actually aggregates to just the unique record of this particular source. So what I might want to start to consider is, let's go ahead and think about prep as an option. Even if I try to massage the data here in desktop, doing some splits, maybe add some calculated fields, we might have to do a little bit more of trying to figure out how this data would work in the actual desktop itself. So more considerations to ask yourself is, what are those steps I'm going to do when I want to prepare it? As if you'd pulled it out and massaged that data or cleaned it. And also really the end is, how do you actually envision that actual data extract to work for us to be able to answer this question in the desktop tool? So I'm going to go ahead and open up Prep. I actually have a work in progress workflow at the moment. And the first thing I'd done before this presentation was basically look at the data and try to clean it a little bit. There was a lot of, in a sense, dirty data. But as you can see, within this one clean step, I had done quite a few multiple changes within the source itself. As you can see, there's a whole bunch of trimming, calculated fields, renaming, even removing some of these fields. And that helped me kind of establish where I want to go with this. You'll also notice that I already have a flow built where I've established my contestants data, and I went ahead and pivot that data and cleaned it as well. But if we kind of go back to my second question I asked, related to the judges and contestants, I need to start to think, all right, should I create another flow to help me establish all of the judges? So if I go and look for the judges' data currently here in my view, in the profile card, you'll notice all of my judges are separated. And if we start to think about how do we want these guys to aggregate, then we'll go, maybe pivoting the data will help us achieve this one instance or one unique portion of that judge's name. Now, as I make this selection, one of the things is, all right, since I mentioned I want to pivot it, we actually have an option within the profile to say, hey, pivot that column to rows. And selecting this button will allow me to create a new branch within my flow. Another alternate way to build the actual pivot is selecting the plus sign from that clean step and then adding that additional step as the pivot itself. But nice little quick thing here. I'm able to apply some of my best practices. I always like to name each of my steps as things become maybe more complicated in our flows. And another thing is, for this particular step, since we have a separate branch, I'm going to go ahead and color that step so I have this separation between the two flows. After I do this, whenever I deal with some of the considerations of cleaning my data, I like to separate my steps. My pivot step stands alone. I'll go ahead and add another clean step here to be able to, again, do those cleaning processes. First, take a look at some of the fields. Do I need them anymore? In this case, I have a pivots one name. It might not be part of my analysis. I'll just do a right click and remove. And then we take a look at the judges' data. As I see the judges, you might start to see some duplications like Aaron Sanchez or Alex G, let's put it that way. Continuing on, I can go ahead and clean that by doing a group and replace and maybe selecting the pronunciation. So with these type of methodologies, we're used to seeing something like this already in desktop, identifying like our different groups. We're just going ahead and apply that here within our flows. So a little bit more cleanup. I have some probably excess columns that may not necessarily pertain to my judges data set. So I would like to quickly go to my show list view here. We actually see the names of all of the different fields already there. And I can go ahead and select all the fields that, again, do not relate to my judges data. Right click and remove. So at this point, I think things are looking good. So I just want to take a quick peek away the way the data is structured at the moment. I have actually a couple of decisions I need to make. Do I create two separate outputs, right? By selecting the little plus sign and say, hey, there'll be one output that's specific to judges, another output that's specific to contestants, and then I can supply that to my end users and they can go ahead and join it themselves in desktop, or I can actually go ahead and do the join here in Prep itself to supply one actual data extract instead. So with that, I think I'm more convinced I'm going to create an actual combining of the data or joining these two data sets. So select the plus sign on either one of the clean steps and apply the join. And then you'll see the join step applied. Bring in that second step, add that together. And now you will see a little bit of a different interface from our desktop tool, but having us be able to visually see how we're going to join the data. So always pick a common column that you need to combine or join with the data set. I'm going to use my series at the moment because I'm showing actually unique episodes for all the seasons I pulled. And you'll notice some of the lovely interfaces that's going to help us identify what rows came from what data source and how many rows we actually pull together. So again, best practice, go ahead and add a clean step to be able to see everything in our view. Maybe take a look at it from all of the different profile cards. And then I can go, I think I'm good. Well, let's clean first. Let's go ahead and remove some of these things. So I have some repetitive columns in my view. So here, anything with the one on the side, I'll make those selections and remove them. And then this should be my end result or my end output. Now, two decisions you can also make here. Decide to go ahead and add the output step and then have everything processed at once to create your output. Or if you feel like you're dealing with so many records, I know some of you will be using millions of rows, processing maybe hundreds of thousands of rows, this creation of the output might take some time. If you kind of want to give yourself a little bit of a spot check, if I go to my clean step, I can actually go ahead and preview it in Tableau Desktop first. It'll be a bit of a quicker process to be able to see it. You'll notice that it actually ran a flow, which is processing every single step up to the clean step I just selected. And then Tableau will actually pop up as a method to say, hey, here's a little bit of a picture of where you are in your data set. So now I can kind of make a little check, right? How am I doing so far? Let's see how many of those judges were actually on the same show as these contestants, maybe using the title at the moment to show the unique episodes. Some of you are seeing that there's duplications of actual chefs or contestants by that judge. And I'm feeling good that this data or the shape of the current output looks okay. So let's go ahead and just go back into my flow. One thing that I want to make sure I do is save my workbook frequently. So hit that save button. And then another thing kind of popped in my mind. Remember, I have two questions I'm trying to answer. First, the second one was answered. Now, where do I actually get my ingredient data? Before this presentation, I was kind of playing around and I created another flow. And I could stay here on the call and walk you guys through all that steps that I processed for the ingredients alone. But maybe just to save some time, one thing that you could do if you guys have multiple flows or maybe have other people working on multiple flows, you can start to bring all of these flows together by inserting them from different files in general. So I'm going to go ahead and select the plus sign directly from my first clean step. Go insert flow. go to my local file, or can go to Tableau server to pick up any of the flows that are already published. Browse, select that one flow I saved, click open, and now you can see already my new flow added directly into my current. So everything's looking good, just a quick view of the way the data looks. Maybe the best part is to be able to view it from here. And then I can make that decision that everything's ready to be able to be published or shared to my colleagues by creating these outputs and executing the flow themselves. So with that, let's go ahead and take a quick peek of what that looks like in our in desktop tool. And so I have it up here already. So I've connected to the two sources separately. And to answer that first question, which ingredient type had the most common dessert basket ingredient, you guys can see now I've isolated the blueberries field, and it counts like 6 times within the actual show that it appeared as well. And my second question was related to what judges and contestants appeared in multiple episodes. As you can see now, I created a little bit of a highlight table indicating which actual judge was on that same show. If we pick, let's say, Anna Marie right here, you can see that a couple of those, Amanda and Chris also, those judges were in the view. So with that, taking a look and kind of bringing us back here, let me just go and bring the view here. So let's kind of take that step back. So why was Tableau Prep created for our actual needs here? First thing is it's an easy to use visual interface. You get into the tool, you go ahead and try it, and you can discover different approaches on your own without actually waiting for another team to be able to do it for you. Smart functionality to save you time. Cleaning and shaping, even some of the recommendations that are placed into the tool itself will help you speed up your process and again give you that like self-service preparation in order for us to be able to do our own self-serve type analytics. And last, they integrate with the actual Tableau suite. It's pretty integral as we talk about building out these sources that eventually we'll have to be able to define the governance of the data. And having that interact, which is pretty cool that Zach also presented right beforehand to show that we have that connection of putting security on some of our flows or even allowing the flexibility of our end users to access that really helps us get our data on demand, especially in the form of the way we would like to see our data. So to close, when starting out with any Tableau tool, one of the key steps to remember is to find your data first, prepare that data, and then what follows along with that is trusting the data and also kind of governing that data as we go. So with that, I want to thank you guys again. And are there any specific questions?
Hi, Joe. Well, thank you so much for that. Do you want to ask pros and cons to like pivoting in prep versus desktop?
Okay. So slightly a little breakup, but I believe the question you asked was the pros and cons for using pivots in prep and desktop.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, so if some of you are already familiar with desktop, you can actually pivot in that tool. And when I shown in my example the pivoting in prep, the con per se is the fact that you can only do a pivot once. In desktop, whereas in prep, you can do it multiple times. And the other thing to think about when you are considering pivots in the choice of doing it in desktop or not, in desktop, you're actually running that pivot multiple times whenever people are actually interacting with the viz or the dashboard. So if we think about doing a pivot in prep, having it already prepared for you or created that flow into an input file or output file, you'll be able to utilize that and not worry about the performance of the repivoting of that data. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that's been really informative. And I just want to thank all of our presenters today. It has been just an amazing lineup that we've had from beginning from 80 and blowing our minds with just the true size and mapping and just all kinds of informative information relative to spatial data and how we look at that and whether we should even visualize it. I just really appreciate 80 for coming on. Mark Reed talked about Viz animations and really showing us the power that they can have and really encouraging us to really become involved with beta programs and using that feature to see how it would apply for our use cases. And Zach told us everything, and it feels like and then some, about the server environment, from just getting started to server expert. Zach provided just a wealth of knowledge in that space. And then finishing up here with Joe and showing us the Tableau prep builder and how that can be helpful for us in prepping our data to then analyze it so we can stay in our analytic flow. Now, all of our presentations today have been recorded and will be available on the Hub as well as YouTube. So if you've missed any of them, fear not, they will be available on the replay. We'll have more information on our next session available on the Hub as well. So stay tuned for details on that. And I want to thank everybody who watched live or who are watching on the replay. Really, this is from the community for the community, and we are so thankful that you've spent your time with us today.